It's not a tourist attraction or a delivery route. And we know it's not a race, because last we looked, there is no finish line. Despite what others may say, space is not a place to go. Space is a place to do. A place to do big things, important things, useful things, epic things, things that help militaries protect better, things that help humans communicate better, things that teach us about other worlds, and about how we can better protect the one we live in now. There's an asteroid up there that may reveal the secrets of the universe if we can bring home a piece of it. Let's do that. We won't need to launch satellites anymore if we can 3D print them up there. Let's do that. There are terabytes of data that must be turned into vital information. Let's do that too. Let's solve the world's biggest problems. Let's invite the bold and the brilliant to join us. Let's unleash the best engineers on and off Earth. Because doing is what we do.
How are you guys doing today? Somebody give me a snack.
Take control of your credit card.
I had a stack of credit card bills. I didn't know what to do with it.
All right. Thanks. Good day. Y'all came home. All right, we're getting it to you. So, like Mike said, thank you guys for coming. I'm Bob. I'm the Director of Quality Assurance for Strategic and Missile Defense, which is a lot of words. It's mainly military stuff. And we are part of the space business. And so basically everything is the same between what I do and what the rest of space does. They launch stuff into space so it goes up and it stays up. And what I do, we launch into space and it comes back down. You don't want to be there where it comes down. So it's a lot of the same technologies. And in terms of the skill set and stuff we're doing is very similar. But we're really just have a different mission. And I want to talk a little bit about jobs in space and jobs in not so much Lockheed, although we are very aggressively recruiting and trying to find people in different locations. We're really just kind of a general space thing. Steve, can you give much of an intro?
Absolutely. So my name is Stephen Girali. I'm a fellow out of our Watertown office. So I work for our Business Innovation, Transformation, and Enterprise Excellence team. I do a lot on our intelligent factory floor. So what we're looking at doing is the kind of optimization of all of our manufacturing, quality, and test. And so I'm doing a lot in the industrial Internet of Things to actually be able to ingest data, be able to take that data, use it across the whole enterprise, so that we can find opportunities where we can save money, where we can get better results, and things of that nature. So, if you guys are at reInvent this year, I have a chalk talk. So we have a great demo that kind of walks folks through that. So it's pretty exciting.
Cool. I can't wait to see that. That'll be great. So thanks for the intro. If you guys don't know, a fellow is kind of a big deal. Steve's one of the big brains of the company. So we're super lucky to have him. So a little bit more, I gave a quick intro on Friday. And just to kind of explain that the space career doesn't necessarily start at point A and launch, and it's just a straight line. It's not even a parabola. I think a lot of times people think that when you're junior in your career, you kind of have to have this plan, and you go through step A and step B, so you go to school and get your advanced degree, and then this and that. And in fact, nothing can be further from the truth. And I think one of the first things I learned was it's really more important to follow your passion and to do what you love to do than it is to try to have a discrete set of steps. And in fact, when you go to school, what you learn is a lot of skills, but the main thing you learn is how to think, how to problem solve, how to organize and structure what you want to accomplish, and how to make sure that you've actually got it done and not just done a bunch of stuff. And so I guess I'll just share a little bit more about my journey to explain that. So I'm actually first generation. I was born in the U.S., but my family's from overseas. And so like a big cultural shock growing up in Ohio, where at the time there wasn't a whole lot of geographic diversity, ethnic diversity. So it was a little challenging, but very quickly found out that you can fit in and get along with people as long as you have common interests. And so growing up, that was a big part. I originally thought I wanted to be a medical doctor or psychiatrist. I got to school, I was like, started taking biology and zoology, and it was really interesting, but it wasn't my passion. And I started taking physics classes, and I was like, wow, this is what I want to do. And so I got into engineering, I became a mechanical engineer and a physicist. And, it was real interesting because that was the time when the internet was exploding. And I started to get into a startup culture, and I got into aerospace just almost completely randomly. Like I knew I wanted to do stuff with physics, and my specialty was actually laser physics and what's called spectroscopy, which is using lasers to measure very precise chemical characteristics of things. And I got into a company that made aircraft wheels and brakes called Goodrich Aerospace. Just at the time, the job I got at the time, it was like, okay, what does lasers have to do with wheels? Nothing. I mean, nothing. I used some of the math I learned, and I used some of the physics I learned, but other than that, it was just, it's a technical job, and I applied my technical mindset. But I had to learn a whole new programming language. I had to learn how to operate the business. And it really was a complete diversion from what I thought I was going to end up doing. And it ended up being my passion. And I ended up following my passion for the aerospace industry. And I got into that, and I moved from company to company. And each time I was kind of like, oh, wow, cool. I enjoy what I do now, but look, here's this new thing I can work on. That sounds super cool. And it was more of a learning journey than it was a discrete, thought out plan to follow. Does that make sense to you guys? Cool. And so now in my current role, so as you go through and you get more experience, you work with people, a lot of times then you get opportunities to grow in management, and I did, and I was a manager and then a senior manager, ended up becoming a director, and you get to learn that beyond just the narrow technical thing you've learned, there's the broader technical way of thinking, and then there's the broader business way of thinking. Because every single thing we do is part of a business venture, unless it's a hobby, which is cool. But even if it's a hobby, you need to raise funds. And within a business, there's this entire ecosystem. There's an entire ecosystem that makes the whole thing work. So the technical folks can't do our job, can't do their job without the whole ecosystem functioning. And the ecosystem includes HR people to find the technical people, finance people to make sure that we are getting funds and we're using funds appropriately, legal people to make sure we're not breaking the law and making sure that if somebody breaks our patent rights or intellectual property rights, that we can defend ourselves. And all these other functions that are necessary, communications, marketing, all these other functions that are necessary to make the whole ecosystem work. And so a lot of people look at a company like Lockheed Martin and they go, wow, they do space stuff, they do airplanes, the F-35, C-130, and all this other airplane stuff and space stuff. And it's like, that's cool for aerospace engineers. I can never do that. Well, I'm not an aerospace engineer. I'm a mechanical engineer, which isn't super different, but most of the people on my team are systems engineers, industrial engineers. And more what we're finding is the people that do well in management, who are the folks that help guide what's going to happen. A lot of the people who are in management have either a technical degree and something in humanities, or they have a more diverse background. Because a lot of times, in order to work at a strategic level, you need to understand more of the ecosystem. And with my technical background, I had to learn all of that kind of the hard way. And so my key message is that we're doing a lot of stuff in this hackathon, which is really exciting and includes the technical side. But in order to be successful, you have to think about the whole ecosystem. And that's what we're trying to do at Lockheed is make sure that everybody is got an opportunity to really just bring their skills and their passion. So that's why I'm super excited about this event. Looking forward to talking more to you guys about it.
Awesome. Yeah, so just like Bob, I've kind of had a diverse set of experiences. I actually started out working for Sun Microsystems, doing a lot of, I was in their kind of IT group, testing out new products and new development tools. And when the dot-com kind of busted in 01, I was looking for an opportunity to land. And I flew right into Lockheed Martin's radar, and it's been a great journey ever since. One of the interesting things about Lockheed, like Bob was mentioning before, is the diversity of the work that we support, from fighter jets all the way to spacecraft, all the way to satellites and ground stations, you name it. It's kind of all over there. We have a littoral combat system, we have missiles and fire control, we have a whole suite of capabilities. These are all smart engineers just like yourselves, coming together, trying to solve a common problem and deliver something that's going to be for the benefit of either humanity or folks within the nation. My background actually kind of came up strictly fully technical. So I'm computer science by major and trade, so I have a BS/MS PhD in computer science. But just like Bob mentioned, business becomes really key. Being able to communicate the business value and the business outcomes and the solutions that you guys are preparing is very important as well. So, as you start to define what the problem set is, what the solution space looks like, what are those business benefits and outcomes that the customer is really going to rely upon and really appreciate? I found that working towards an MBA kind of gave me that exposure that I never had before, something that I never thought of. I thought about the ones and the zeros. I thought about the math. I thought about those types of things. I never really got into that aspect. And so I've always kind of been one of those folks that kind of moves from position to position to position. And at Lockheed, I've had the opportunity to do that, where I can actually try different jobs in different positions. I've done software engineering. I've done system architecture. I've done enterprise architecture. I've done test. I've done quality. You name it, I've pretty much done it within the company, because the point of the matter is I'm a lifetime learner, like Bob was mentioning. I like to get out there. I like to learn new things, apply them, and then do the next thing, and so on and so forth. And just like what was said before, as we grow up in our careers, the scale of what we create changes, right? It starts from, hey, I need to develop this one solution, this one little app, and the whole ecosystems, to how do I scale this? How do I take and build a whole constellation of satellites, a whole capability matrix that can really support our customers and really turn the dial on what they need? And so, the journey overall has been just amazing and awesome. I've been with Lockheed for 19 years. It's been just an awesome experience. Just so excited about the work that we do and getting to work with great folks like yourselves that are out there in the tech field, just solving problems. So.
Thanks, Steve. I didn't know you did quality. That's exciting. Good for you. Yeah, so I guess this is kind of an informal thing. I can keep talking for hours, or you guys can ask questions. That's a prompt. Yes?
Throughout college year, like the summer time, you love physics. Like, would you change anything about your process? Like, if you could go back in time, would you try and start right away exploring all these things, like instead of locking yourself?
Yeah, so the question was, looking back, let me see if I got this right. Looking back, I knew that I loved physics. Would I have changed anything about kind of my background or what I did? Yeah, so it's a great question, because you always kind of think like, oh, geez, I wish I had figured that out sooner. But part of it is I wouldn't have been the person ready to do that if I hadn't done what I did before. And I wouldn't have understood a lot of the bigger picture if I hadn't done, psychology classes and all these other things that I did. And when I got there, I still would have loved physics. I wouldn't have known what to do with it in the way that I do. So I think, again, it's really important that you don't see something you do that's not on that linear path. You don't see those things as diversions or lost time. You see them as something that's helping you grow in a different way. Does that help?
What kinds of things are Lockheed doing around Seattle? Are there any options that are able to do there?
We actually have, if I remember the statistics correctly, we have about 200 people in Washington State in 6 different locations. So I actually am here because tomorrow I'm going to go to the west coast of Washington. There's a naval base in a town near Bangor /Keyboard/ Bremerton. And we actually have a strategic weapons facility. Anytime you guys hear the word strategic, it's code for nuclear. So we do nuclear weapons for our submarine ballistic missiles. So I'm going to be going there to work with my team there this week. We also have a group in Bothell that does laser research, and they're actually one of the premier companies that are doing high energy laser stuff. And then we have other groups that are integrated with suppliers that make stuff. We have like 1,900 suppliers in the state of Washington that build stuff for Lockheed Martin. So it's pretty substantial integration with the local community. Yeah.
How do you see the future of commercial space?
The question was, how do you see the future of commercial space? You're probably more in tune with that than I am.
Sure, I can give that a shot. So, one of the interesting things that kind of happened recently was Jeff Bezos and the Amazon team created a thing called Revars. It actually happened in Vegas. It was like March or April. And the concept of it is, it stands for machine learning, artificial intelligence, robotics, and space. And the whole concept of it is that we're starting to see a lot of commercialization in the space domain as a whole. We're finding that low Earth orbit and even just kind of commercial space traffic in and of itself is obviously a growing area. That's part of the reason why you're seeing NASA kind of moving further out, right? They're going for long range things like going to Mars and orbiters and different missions of that nature. And so I actually liked the talk that Jeff gave at the conference because one of the things he said when he was creating Amazon is he could sit on the backs of giants, right? He could sit on FedEx and USPS and all these other folks that could provide the logistics of delivering packages. And what you're finding in the whole space realm is that everybody's now helping to build out that infrastructure, right? People are looking at different launch vehicles in order to get things out into space. People are looking at opportunities to do 3D printing, whether it's like on the lunar base camp and being able to actually shoot down on the moon, build stuff there so you don't have to keep spending a lot of money getting stuff up into space in and of itself. And so I think what we're going to see over time, and it's already happening, is there's a ton of startups. And they're actually deploying a lot of CubeSats. They're actually looking down onto the Earth and being able to do different sensing of what's happening there and being able to sell that as a service. Well, if you think about that, I mean, the payloads themselves are millions of dollars. To launch it's millions of dollars. And so now we're actually getting to the point where you as a consumer, as an individual, can go, hey, I want to pull a satellite picture at this given range, at this given time, with this type of clarity in these sensing packages. And so all that's directly changing how everything's happening in space, which is great. Because the more we can get out there, the better, right? And frankly, from my point of view, I think the more that folks are getting excited about robotics and other opportunities and 3D additive manufacturing and these types of things, the more that we can really kind of push out and really get out into different planetary missions and options as humans, which you put a human on Mars, you learn so much more faster within a couple of days that it's taking years or decades to learn, right? So I'm very excited about the future.
And Steve, I think everyone else knows what this is, but I forgot. What's a CubeSat?
So typically when we're talking about satellites, a lot of what Lockheed builds is we build fairly large satellites. They kind of sit in geo orbit, so they're kind of geosynchronous orbit. They're fairly large. It takes a few of them in order to produce the different mission solutions that we're creating. Well, what you're finding in the commercial space, folks like Elon Musk and others, like SpaceX and Starlink and these other types of things, is they're trying to set up commercial entities within the lower Earth orbit. So these are very small satellites, very inexpensive. You can deploy hundreds, if not thousands of them at any given time. And they're doing a full range of missions, from providing internet connectivity to being able to do different sensing and environmental things. And so anyways, a CubeSat is just a smaller version of a common satellite that we usually do.
Thank you for reminding me. It's really exciting stuff. Did that answer your question?
Yes, I think that's great. So it's very good. So can I have a follow-up? So how how do you make money on space?
How do you make, the question is, how do you make money on space? You want to take that one?
Sure. So, there are so many opportunities here. I mean, obviously you got to get your payloads up to space. So there's a whole folks just dedicated to launch, right? And what it takes to do that, right? And there's opportunities. I mean, if you look at what we've done on the launch side, a lot of folks have taken launch and now making reusable vessels that they can then lower the cost for shipping additional things into space. So there's a whole launch side of the business. There's the whole, if you think about the satellites and all the mission and all the data that we can pull, you guys saw yesterday when we walked through the NASA data, all that data is freely available. It's for the exploration of science and things of that nature. And what folks are doing is they're taking that data and they're building different apps and different capabilities to showcase to others. So for instance, Weather Channel is a good example. You might think, oh, they're just giving me weather. Well, how's that impacting things? Well, they're actually taking the data that's coming from their weather and their predictive models. They're feeding it to United. They're feeding it to American Airlines and Delta and all these folks so that they can reposition planes. They can reorient their travel schedules. And they're selling that as a service, right? And so what you're seeing is a lot of folks don't want to go into these big capital expenditures where I got to go spend thousands, millions, whatever amount of dollars. I want to be able to just pay for a unit of time, a unit of capability going forward. So I think what you're going to find in the space side is there's folks that are specializing in launch, there's people specializing in missions, there's people specializing in data, there's people specializing in platforms. So just trying to get humans to the moon again, maybe humans to Mars. Those are all opportunities that a lot of companies are playing in to try and support those types of missions. So, it could be as small as a very, 10-person team all the way up to large entities that are all going to be developing and creating value that are going to be resellable to customers.
How have you seen design fit into this space, like graphic design, 3D models, and conceptualizing, etc.?
Yeah, so, at least in my experience, we're actually going to a fully model-based environment, which means the time that you go and create a product, let's say you're building the next aircraft, it's all done in 3D CAD. Before you even print out a part, we actually have a simulation lab that we call our chill that basically allows you to simulate different aspects from the manufacturing to make sure that folks that actually have to torque, that we're not putting them in awkward positions or areas that are going to hurt them. They can actually throw on a VR headset. They can actually get into it and follow the work instructions to see what it takes to perform those activities, all the way into eventually where we produce the product itself. So a lot of the parts that are actually going into our satellites are now 3D printed parts. So everything that you kind of saw in the video before, we're moving in that direction to where we're literally producing no scrap. We can build, we can test, and provide those types of functions. And not only that, but everything that we build using CAD can be visualized using augmented reality, virtual reality. So what you want to do on the design side is be able to get your customer and get their experience with something that's not built yet, right? So you can start to build little models and kind of start to show them. You can put them in the VR experience, let them see what's all being involved. And we're talking about not just the whole process of building the product, but also the whole review cycle. Imagine if your customer doesn't have to leave, well, where do they go? They throw on their headset, hey, we'll walk you through it. Everything's being piped through the audio. They can truly just be immersed with wherever they're at and being able to share that with other customers and other folks, other stakeholders as well.
Yeah, you mentioned graphic design. I think that's really important because it informs user interface analysis and how are people actually going to use stuff. In addition to kind of the general classic graphic design elements of communication and marketing and all that stuff, which we do as well, we have to. Every company has to some degree. It's also more of how does that skill set inform user interface and usability and all that kind of stuff. Because we're learning more and more. If you think about, did you guys hear about the first all-female spacewalk? And so like this classic thing, they were supposed to go earlier this year and they got there late. So where's my suit? Oh, darn, we don't have enough suits for your size, right? So more and more, we are realizing that if we open the aperture to more and more people, we can get more and more skilled people to do stuff. right? And so we're building a more variety of spaces. Well, that's also letting them redesign spaces. And they're making a super good spacesuit because they actually haven't redesigned it in a gazillion years, right? And so how do the skills of graphic design play into that? It plays into what should we be doing to fit more people, to fit more, diversity of whatever, and how do we make that accessible? So I think it's that thought process that's really powerful.
So, what do you think about the current, like, public opinion about, like, space travel and the whole, going into space? Because, we're all space nerds and we love space. But how do you convince, quote unquote, ordinary people that this kind of stuff is worth doing?
That's a great question. The question was, so what can we do to help convince the general public that investment in space is worth it? I kind of paraphrased. Is that
Yeah,
close enough?
that's exactly.
So look, I'll give you my answer. I grew up in a time where we thought we were going to be creating space colonies, within 10 years, and that was kind of 30 years ago. And there was the same questions then, and NASA got on this campaign of valorizing spin-off technology, right? So if we go to the moon, we're going to invent all these things, and those things will help us, develop industry and capabilities moving further. I think the short answer is, unfortunately, humans react to needs. And I think the more people can tie the promise of space to solving their particular problems and the needs of humanity, the more we're going to see that connection, the more people understand the connection, the more people are going to be vested and be willing to support space exploration. And so you look at the projects you guys are doing in this hackathon, what are they all around? They're all around solving environmental problems, around solving, geopolitical problems, all the kind of stuff that, quite frankly, our current structures and governments are not able to really solve. And for me, that's the answer to your question is, by looking at what are the big problems we don't know how to solve otherwise, how can space exploration help us to figure out those solutions? Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
Twirling your coffee, so. It's gotta I wish I had coffee. Do you have, Steve, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I guess the adder that I would add, and Bob, I thought your answer was awesome. I think it really comes down to being able to get the next generation excited and motivated, and there's so many opportunities. Just within Lockheed alone, what we try to do is, there's a whole concept called FIRST, which is about getting elementary school, about getting middle school, about getting high school folks really interested in STEM-related activities and those types of things. We do a thing called Code Quest to try and get high school students excited about coding competitions. We do Cyber Quest to try and get security folks excited about security and doing capture the flag events. And so I think the more that we can kind of build up the interest level, the asking you to showers too. The more that we can kind of build up that interest level for everybody, and really it's about giving back to the community, right? I mean, at the end of the day, space is something that you're going to go and do. It's something that's going to it's an incremental thing that has to constantly be pursued. And so I think the more that we can build the passion, the desire in our younger folks to continue the path forward, all the better. But I totally agree on solving the critical problems of the day and being able to leverage that in order to push the mission forward is probably the number one thing. But there's supporting indirect activities you can do as well.
I'm just realizing, can you guys see us, or is there like this glare behind us? There's this technology called blindness. Wow. All right, so we'll start over. Is that right? Okay, what other questions do you guys have? Comments? Yes, sir.
So, you just mentioned about human being needs, and what kind of human being needs can be satisfied by space?
Yeah, so the question was kind of what human being needs can be satisfied by space and space exploration, right? So a lot. I mean, again, kind of thinking back to when I was younger, we talked about colonies, right? We talked about making room for the growing population of this planet. We can also talk about access to resources. If you look at what's in just the asteroid belt or the moon, there's tremendous gazillions of pounds of rare earth elements that on our planet are so scarce, starting to mine junk piles of ore that had already been mined and thrown away because we can't find enough of these rare earth elements for things like lithium batteries. Lithium batteries in your laptop or whatever, but they're also the cornerstone of power technology, right? So space for people, access to resources, and some of the technologies that can work in low gravity environments. Like you can build stuff in low gravity environment that you could never build on the planet because you don't have to deal with gravity. And you can do things with much bigger surfaces. Like we could build giant solar sails, giant, I'm talking about miles and miles wide that just capture solar energy and they're whatever in heliocentric orbit and they're just sitting there sucking up sunlight that we could never do that on Earth, right? There's just not enough space. So there's tremendous opportunity to solve a lot of humanity's big problems right now. So was there something else you were thinking of specifically or?
So I'm thinking about how can space science and technology solve the environmental problems we are facing, such as the garbage, oceanic change, and the evolution of the global warming, and also food security.
Yeah.
So the population is growing, and I heard the amount of soil is actually increasing.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think those are all really big challenges, and I think a lot of them we don't know how we're going to solve them. But again, the bigger we try to reach, the more we're going to learn things about the big picture. So I think a lot of the solutions are out there. We just don't know. Last one. Okay. You want to take this? That's what it is. Is there another one? Say two more.
All right, so this one's kind of for you, I guess. So who do you look up to inside the company? Why? Given where you are.
Sure. So the question was, who do I look up to in the company? Well, our CEO is a pretty amazing woman. Marilyn Hewson has tremendous pedigree. She's made tremendous changes within the company. She's got a tremendous vision. I would love to be like her. We also have a vice president of one of our biggest product lines, the submarine missile that I mentioned earlier. Our vice president's name is Sarah Heiser, and she is just a tremendous, strategic person, and she understands how to work with people. And so I think we've got a lot of really, really impressive leaders within our company. Those are just the first two that come to mind. Honestly, I just feel really, really lucky to work with our leadership team.
Yeah, the CEO definitely, Marilyn Houston, she's always, probably number one, number two on the Forbes list of the most powerful women. She's just flat out amazing. Another one that I would mention is her name is Stephanie Hill. She's actually head of our digital transformation office and group to try and really push our team forward and trying to set the vision and set the execution paths. And both of these women are just powerhouses and amazing to watch, and amazing to see them work and set a vision and move the company in a direction that needs to go.
Yeah, I don't want you to get the impression that there aren't impressive men at our company too. We just happen to think of three women that are out there, but they're folks of all genders that are very, very impressive. So those are just the two that came to my mind. Yeah, go ahead.
And my question relates to what you were saying before. Why now? Why is space being commercialized now as compared to 20 years ago? Was there a trigger point or a sea change?
Yeah, that's a great question. Do you want to start that one?
Sure. So, I think the whole launch business kind of got flipped completely. So when SpaceX and Blue Origin and those folks made reusable rockets, that just lowered the barrier of entry to get stuff into space, right? So people are going, okay, that's exciting. And then you started getting folks going, hey, I don't have to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on just a satellite or a couple of satellites. I can actually spend $2 or $3 million and get a CubeSat. And it can do a lot of capabilities that I didn't have before. Now, it may not do everything that we do on the bigger type satellites, but it has capability and it can do things that are required for the mission. And we came up with new mechanisms to deploy those CubeSats, right? In order to kind of get those capabilities out there and available. And now what you're seeing a lot of venture capitalists is a lot of folks putting money into the whole space side of the business. So where a lot of folks go, oh, the only way we're going to get to space is if the government invests in it. We actually have venture capitalists, putting money into that. And we have very small startups. There's hundreds of them that I've just seen personally, and there's probably thousands that are all working towards what are new capabilities, what are the new services that folks are going to need if they're going to start doing, missions within space, and how can we make that reusable and sellable and consumable? And so I think what you're starting to see is that because all the barriers are starting to lower, now folks are going, hey, this is pretty exciting, and now even large companies are going, hey, I think it was Boeing and Virgin Galactic that just had a huge business trade saying, hey, we're gonna do flight together, we're gonna make that happen. And so you're also seeing a lot of conglomerates, large companies come together to support certain missions. So the amount of innovation that's happening, and the way the business models are changing is completely different. And I think it's gonna really, push what we've been doing in space, what you've seen in the last 20, 30 years, the next 20 or 30 aren't gonna look like it, right? Because when we double down on technology, it's exponential type growth. So it's gonna be really exciting to see what it plans.
Can I get my answer, Mike?
Go for it.
Okay. So I think everything you said, I'm going to build on some of the stuff you said. I think there's three things to think about. One is not so long ago, we had the Challenger disaster, and that literally stopped NASA in its tracks for years. And it woke up public opinion to the fact that we need to do this, and governments aren't the only answer. And so we got more of an impetus that like, hey, who's going to help fill this gap? The commercial sector will fill the gap. The second is about technology. We've seen tremendous, you just think about the internet. Before the internet, how did you get information? You walked to the library, you drove to the library, right? And you looked stuff up in a bunch of physical books. And if they didn't have the book you needed, you ordered it and it showed up 2 weeks later. Just this incredible access to gazillion bytes of data. Yeah, that's a real thing, gazillion bytes. And, it's just completely changed the way people operate within the sciences. And so those technologies, and now we have machine learning and the Internet of Things and these other leverage points that would be like the internet in a short amount of time that are enabling us to do the stuff we are doing in space we could not do before. Cheap cloud computing. How about affordable cloud computing? You AWS guys, right? That didn't exist. That did not exist. If you wanted space, computer space, storage space, servers, you needed to go out and get it and invest in it, buy it, and 6 months later it was obsolete. The new model of computing power is completely different, which enables stuff completely different. The third thing is necessity. What I said earlier, people are just more and more aware that we've got big problems that can only be solved on a global scale. And they can only be solved by motivated, passionate people like the people in this room and people still working on their presentations over there, right? That's the only way we're going to solve it. People from a diverse background getting together, solving the real problems and bringing a passion to solve them and being able to look at that. So it's three things. One was recognition that governments are not the only answer. The second is technology as those leverage points to be able to get things done. And the third thing is a global recognition that we've got big problems we have to solve, and that the people who can solve them are the people that are going to put these building blocks together because they have a passion. Is that good?
Thank you.
Okay, I think we're getting the hook.
Thank you.
That was amazing. What a great way to wrap up the talk. You guys are so engaged and active in this discussion. I know you've got the passion that I was just talking about, and we got the pizza. So go get lunch, finish your project pages, get repo, right? Whatever your repository is, get it on there, choose your license, get your presentation.